Comenius, Plants, Part 2, Garden Herbs, also known as kitchen herbs, pot herbs, salad herbs, or vegetables. Before devouring the vegetables in Mr. Comenius's garden, let's look at a roadmap to his treatment of herbs. If you watched our Praefationes to these plant videos, you're familiar with Theophrastus's classical distribution of virtually all vegetative life into trees, shrubs, subshrubs, and herbs: dendron, tamnos, pruganon, poa, arbor, frutex, sufrutex, herba. Theophrastus probably invented the subshrub category based on his observation of plants that were woody at the base and herbaceous at the top. If we set aside subshrubs, as many future botanists did, we're left with trees, shrubs or bushes, and herbs, a mental division human beings probably had long before Theophrastus. Now, Comenius dedicated 3 of the 100 sections of the Yanua to plants, starting with trees. If you're following these videos in sequence, you've already studied his treatment of trees in our Plants Part 1. I expected him to then follow the natural order from trees to shrubs, and from there to herbs, but for whatever reason he goes from trees to herbs, and then to shrubs. Because of their enormous number and variety of species, herbs have always presented a special challenge to those writing and teaching about plants, and botanists have come up with many ways to subclassify them. Comenius divides herbs into olera, ta lacana, fruges, to citon, and flores, ta anthe, and we present these as plants parts 2, 3, and 4, respectively. We serve up olera in this video. In part 3, you'll see Comenius dividing fruges into grain crops and legumes. This fundamental division goes back, as you learned in our Praefatio, to Theophrastus. Book 7 begins his coverage of herbs, ta poiode, to genos in hoi sumperi lambanon typos to lacaneron kai to citodes, and to Pliny. Pliny says, duo sunt prima frugum genera. There are 2 primary types of fruges: frumenta, such as wheat and barley, and legumina, such as beans and peas. The difference, he adds, being rather obvious. Finally, in part 4, you'll see Comenius again following ancient precedents, dividing flores into bulbous, aromatic, odoriferous, coronary, and medicinal. Yanua, de herbis, tam hortensibus quam silvestribus, peri poon, hemeronta kai agrion. Herba excrescens cauli vel scapo inititur, botane auxomene cauloi hereditae. In Pliny, scapus is a synonym for caulis, stalk or stem. In classical Latin, the name scapus is also applied to many diverse things that resemble a stem. Scapus is cognate with Greek skeptatai, meaning to lean on, as this man leans on his walking stick, ho aner bactroi skeptatai. Scape has become a modern botanical term, as in the scape of the Amaryllis belladonna lily. Rapum, vel rapa, gungulis e gungule, napus, bunias. Turnip and rape are species of the Brassica genus of the mustard family Brassicaceae. Turnips, for example the white turnip shown here, Brassica Rapa subspecies Rapa, are cultivated mostly for their bulbous, edible taproots. Rapeseed is cultivated mostly for its seeds. One of its cultivars is canola, which gives us the vegetable oil of the same name. Yellow-flowered rapeseed grown wild in fields and meadows is quite stunning. The species, subspecies, and varieties of turnip and rape are easily and often confused. One way of distinguishing them is their roots. Here is how Linnaeus distinguished the Brassica Rapa and the Brassica Napus in the Species Plantarum, along with pictures from the English herbal of a century earlier. The Brassica Rapa is Radice caulescente orbiculari depressa carosa, with a caulescent, meaning with a leafy stalk rising from the ground, circular, depressed, meaning flattened from above, somewhat sunken at the center, fleshy root. That's easily seen in the Rapum maius, or great turnip, in the English herbal. The Brassica napus is Radice caulescente fusiforme, with a caulescent, spindle-shaped root. Fusus is Latin for spindle. The English herbal distinguishes rape, which it calls Rapum sylvestre, or wild turnip, and navu, which it calls by the Greek name bunias, but in general, navu is an antiquated name for rape. Also a little confusing, the names turnip and rape seem to have gotten turned upside down. Our authorities are clear. Pliny's Rapum or Rapa, Greek gongule, is Linnaeus's Brassica Rapa, but we don't call this rape, we call it turnip, and the suffix nip in turnip actually comes from napus. Tur is of unknown origin. The authorities are equally clear. Pliny's napus, Greek bunias, is Linnaeus's Brassica napus, but we don't call it nip, we call it rape, which of course comes from Rapum, Rapa. The obsolete name navu did come from napus. Brassica, Crambe, and an Attic, including Theophrastus, Heirapanos. From wild Brassica oleracea, humans have developed over the years many familiar cultivars: cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, collard greens, etc. Latin Brassica has given us our mustard family name, Brassicaceae, and its type genus Brassica. Nasturtium, cardamom. Nasturtium in Pliny, cardamom in Theophrastus and Dioscorides, is our garden cress. Linnaeus named the garden cress Lepidium sativum, and that name and classification have stuck, though since Linnaeus, botanists have added a genus Nasturtium. Nasturtium officinale is the watercress. Where did Linnaeus get the genus name Lepidium from? Latin lepidium, Greek lepidion, are Pliny and Dioscorides' name for pepperwort or ditander, Linnaeus's type species for his Lepidium genus, his and our Lepidium latifolium. But to go back to watercress for a minute, in Dioscorides and Pliny, watercress went by, among other names, Sicimbrium and cardamine. In Dioscorides, Sicumbrion, hoide cardaminen, hoide kai tuto sion calusin, the watercress, but some call it cardamine, and some call this plant too sion, that is the name of his previous plant, Enudrosisti poa. Sicumbrium is a water herb, like the sion. Pliny uses the Greek word Sicumbrium sylvestre, quibustam thumbrium appellatum, pedali non amplius altitudine, quod in riguis nascetur simile nasturtio est. Wild Sicumbrium, called by some Thumbrium, grows no higher than a foot. The type that grows in watery districts resembles garden cress. From these names, Linnaeus created two more genera, now also in the Brassicaceae family, as in the Sicumbrium altissimum and the Cardamine amara, which is another cress, bitter cress. Cress, by the way, is a nice Germanic name. To muddy up the nomenclatural waters even more, the nasturtium also serves today as a common name in English for what was called in the time of Comenius Indian cress, or in Latin writers Nasturtium indicum, as shown in this page from the English Herbal, describing a plant imported into Europe from Peru. The Latin name Nasturtium came to prevail over Indian cress as the common name and is still in use today, even though the plant is no longer classified as a cress or even as a member of the Brassicaceae family. To come full circle, however, Pliny and Comenius's Nasturtium, Theophrastus and Dioscorides' Cardamon is our Lepidium sativum, garden cress. Raphanus minor, Rapanis. Raphanus major, well Armorachia, Agria rapanis. Raphanus is radish. Radish is Raphanus. That is all you need to know. Well, actually, it's not quite that simple. If he had just said Raphanus, we might indeed have just said radish and moved on. But what did Comenius have in mind with Raphanus minor and Raphanus major? Let's dig. First, let's address the nomenclature. The English word radish and its many European language cognates refer to the plant as a whole, but also to the radish's sometimes very large taproot. And in fact, the word radish evolved not from Raphanus, but from radix, radicum. For example, in these lines from Plautus's bawdy comedy Cassina. Now the plot's too complicated to fully explain, but briefly, a father and son are competing to seduce the neighboring slave girl Cassina. At a certain point in the plot, the husband's slave Olympio, in cahoots with his master, has himself tried to seduce Cassina, though unbeknownst to him, Cassina in that scene, thanks to the husband's wife's plotting, was actually a male slave dressed as a woman. One other thing you need to know, the wife had also had it communicated to her husband, in order to scare him off, that Cassina concealed a sword and planned to kill him with it if he attempted to seduce her. Olympio was aware of this as he commenced his seduction. His attempt failed, and here Olympio is recounting what happened to another slave girl, Pardalisca. He had moved his hand down Cassina's... Well, you get it. What did he find, Pardalisca asks. Oh, erat maximum, he says. Oh, it was enormous. Ferrum ne haberet metui, id quaedere occapi. I was afraid she'd have a sword. I began looking for it. Dum gladium quaero ne habeat, arrepio capulum. While I was checking that she doesn't have a sword, I got a hold of a hilt. Sed quum cogito non habuit gladium, nam esset frigidus. But when I think about it, she didn't have a sword because it would have been cold. Eloquere, tell us. At pudet, but I'm ashamed. Num radix fuit? Was it a radish? Non fuit. Num cucumis? A cucumber? Profecto Hercle, istuc nescio, sed non fuit quicquam holerum. I don't know what the hell it was, but it wasn't any vegetable. Also, with regard to nomenclature, there was some confusion in antiquity regarding the Greek name for radish. The root of the confusion, so to speak, was a difference between Attic and non-Attic Greek. Let's stick with comedy as our source material. In Aristophanes' comedy Plutos, Wealth, the old farmer Cremulus is railing to the goddess Poverty, Penia, about life as she would have it. Citestae de antimen arton malaces tortus, antidemasdes pule isc non rapanidon. Instead of bread to eat, we get shoots of mallow. Instead of barley cake, leaves of withered radishes. Now you may know that scholia are critical or explanatory comments, usually written in late antiquity, ranging in format from marginal notations to entire dissertations on some work of the bygone golden era of classical literature. The scholiast to Aristophanes Plutos wrote this comment on the words isc non rapanidon. Isc non rapanidon, atikoi rapanida pasin hen hemes rapanon, palinda rapanon hen hemes cramben. The Athenians call rapanis that which we call rapanos, i.e. radish. Again, they call rapanos what we call crambe, that is cabbage. The scholiast adds this bit of etymology, eretai de rapanis parato radios painestai, logos gar hosperomene taton anesin. Rapanis is named thus because it appears readily. In other words, in this view, the word rapanis is formed from radios plus painestai. The thinking, the scholiast explains, is that when planted, the radish's head appears very quickly above ground. Anyway, this Attic and Theophrastian usage apparently tripped up Pliny. Following Theophrastus, Pliny wrote that the Greeks distinguished three kinds of radish distinguished by their leaves: genera Raphani, Graeci fecera trea, foliorum differentia, crispi, atque leves, et tertium silvestre. Pliny was evidently unaware that Raphanus crispus, meaning wrinkled or crisped leaf radish, referred to cabbage and not to radish. Nevertheless, the Romans adopted the non-Attic and later rapanos as the Latin word for radish. By Comenius' time, the number of radish species had multiplied, and the nomenclature problem, as with so many other plants, was out of control. So how do we figure out which vegetables Comenius meant by Raphanus minor and Raphanus major? As we did with trees, let's look at the botanists from Comenius' era, in particular Gaspard Bohin's table or Pinox. Bohin includes Raphanus in his first section of his book on Olera et Oleracea. In this section's excerpted table of contents here, you can also see, by the way, Olera we've already consumed: Rapa, Napus, Brassica, Nasturtium, Lepidium. Bohin takes all the radish species, names, and descriptions of his predecessors and groups them into 6 categories. We didn't have room on the slide for the 6th, Raphanus aquatica. The first and third categories Bohin names, respectively, Raphanus major and Raphanus minor. So at first glance, these must certainly be candidates for Comenius' major and minor. Bohin notes that Romberdodoans called these Radicula sativa and Radicula sativa minor. Radicula, the diminutive of radix, is another ancient Roman name for radish, as in this dietary advice from the Roman physician Celsus: Qui mane vomiturus est, esse radiculum debet. He who wants to vomit upon getting up in the morning should eat a radish. Here are Dodoen's Rapanis sive radicula sativa and Radicula sativa minor, illustrated in his 1583 work Stirpium Historiae Pemptades Sex. Bohin described the root of his Raphanus major, Dodoen's Rapanis sive radicula sativa, as orbiculatus, well rotundus, and that is illustrated here in the 1633 English Herbal of Gerard and Thomas, which was, especially in its first edition, to a large extent a translation of Dodoen's. However, upon further digging, we see that both Bohin's Raphanus major and his Raphanus minor are variants of the common garden radish Raphanus sativus, and we believe that these are all comprehended by Comenius' Raphanus minor. We must look elsewhere for his Raphanus major. And we find it in Bohin's 5th category, Raphanus rusticanus, wild radish. Bohin finds this plant in Dioscorides, actually twice, and in Pliny. We'll come back to Dioscorides' Thlaspi Alterum in a minute. To the end of his chapter on Rapanis, Dioscorides adds this note: He de agria Rapanis, hen Romaioi armoracion calusi, hula ecce homoia te hemeroi prostates lampsanes malon, risda de iskne, macra, hypodrimus. But wild radish, which the Romans call armoracion, has leaves resembling the cultivated, tending rather towards the leaves of the charlock, but its root is thin, long, and somewhat sharp. Pliny confirms there is an Agria rapanis, or Raphanus sylvestris, the Romans call Armorachia, but again with some confusion about the names. Etiam num unum, id est genus Raphani sylvestre, Graeci Kerain vocant, pontici armon, alei leucen nostri Armorachiam. There is also one variety of wild radish, called by the Greeks Kerain, in the Pontus country Armos, or by other people Leucae, and by our nation Armorachia. Before identifying this wild radish, let's first address the confusion in Pliny. In enumerating medicinal plants from Arcadia in Book 9, Theophrastus mentions a species, Puetaida par autois, tois arcasi, kai hen ekenoimen rapanon agrian calusi tonda iatrontines kerain. There is grown by the Arcadians also a plant they call rapanon agrian, but some doctors call kerain. Pliny notwithstanding what the Arcadians called rapanos agria, and what some physicians in Theophrastus's time called kerais, is not the Armorachia. It is another Lacanon agrion Dioscorides calls lampsane. It is the plant we call wild radish or charlock, scientific name Raphanus raphanistrum. Dioscorides rapanis agria, on the other hand, the Romans Armorachia, Bohin's Raphanus rusticanus, is our Armorachia rusticana, horseradish. Bohin noted that Brunfels, Tragus, and Gessner had called this plant Raphanus major, and we believe it is Comenius's Raphanus major, pictured here in the English herbal and already called horseradish in English. There you have it. But besides Dioscorides agria rapanis, Bohin cites another plant in Dioscorides as also being the Raphanus rusticanus or horseradish, namely a type of thlaspi. This is probably not the case, but since some sources say it is, including the Wikipedia article on horseradish as of July 2017, let's dispense with it. To get to Dioscorides' name for Bohin's thlaspi alterum, we must first know the Greek name for mustard, which was to sinapi, and in Attic and Theophrastus to napu. Pliny and the Romans borrowed both words. This is generally identified as our white mustard, Sinapis alba, naturally another genus and species in the mustard family, Brassicaceae. So here is Totthlaspi in Dioscorides. It is shepherd's purse, Capsella bursa pastoris. At the end of his discussion, Dioscorides notes, Historietae de Crateuas kai heteron thlaspi hotines persicon sinepi calusi. Crateuas tells of another shepherd's purse, which some call Persian mustard. Pliny alterum thlaspi aliqui persicon napu vocant. Bohin, and apparently some today, take this Persian mustard to also be horseradish, but all things considered, this seems doubtful. Compared to, say, naked lady lily or shepherd's purse, does horseradish strike you as a rather ugly name? In the English language of Shakespeare and Comenius' time, horse had an adjectival meaning large, coarse, gross, and the name horseradish reflected people's perception of this plant or its root as coarse or gross. But this was not the estimation of the Greeks, according to Pliny with his big Roman nose up in the air. Ut est Graeca vanitas, fertur in templo Apollinus Delphis adeo ceteris cibis praelatus rapanus, ut ex auro dedicaretur, beta ex argento, rapum ex plumbo. Such is the frivolity of the Greeks, that it is said that in the temple of Apollo at Delphi, radish, and this is generally taken to mean horseradish, was rated so far above all other articles of food that it was dedicated as a votive offering modeled in gold, beetroot in silver, turnip in lead. So in sum, we take Comenius's Raphanus minor to be the common cultivated garden radish, Rapanis in Attic and earlier Greek, and his Raphanus major to be horseradish, Dioscorides agria rapanis, the Romans Armorachia, our Armorachia rusticana. Congratulations, you are now radish experts. That completes Comenius's examples of potherbs that we classify as members of the family Brassicaceae, known as the mustard, cabbage, or crucifer family. This family was once called Cruciferi, and the vegetables within it are sometimes still referred to as the cruciferous vegetables because the 4 flower petals in most of the species resemble a cross.